Now, this video is going to be on martial law indicators, or at least some of the things I look for as possible tip-offs that an event is about to occur, a martial law event. This was something that was asked of me by one of my oldest subscribers, Brandon, if I remember correctly. I'm not going to give your last name. Sorry it took so long to get to this. First thing that I do is I look for, and this will be probably the first indicator you're going to notice, unusual delivery to the police of light sets, generators, K-rails, which are your concrete barriers, and fencing materials. This will be unusual deliveries. You may have, say, a fair or some type of sports event going on where you'll see this stuff getting dropped off. Usually you see this stuff getting dropped off at a time when none of that's about to occur. That's unusual. Now, it may not get delivered directly to the police station or sheriff's office or that type of stuff. It might be delivered to a warehouse and that stuff. But word will get around that law enforcement has received the deliveries. That's one of the things I look for. That'll probably be the one thing that you will notice first. Next, right behind that, will be unusual training being done by the police. Now, since 9/11, there has been a lot more counterterrorism type training and that type of stuff. And your state police and federal, they train nonstop on this stuff. You're looking for unusual training by the local police departments. So you're looking like, say, Pork Bend, Utah, or Podunk, Arkansas, police departments where you got only Sheriff Andy Griffith and his Deputy Barney Fife. Well, they all of a sudden are starting to do terrorism training and stuff. Counterterrorism training, rounding up and mass arrests and stuff. That might be an indication that something's going to be happening soon, and that would probably take place, say, a few months out before the event. It wouldn't be right before. Another indicator, and this is one that would probably happen within 48 hours before a martial law event would occur. You would see a mass call-in of reserve and guard units. Now, they do not have the same chain of command. Your National Guard reports to the governor and the State National Guard Bureau. Your reserves, whether it's Marine, Naval, Army, Air Force, they report to the Federal Command Authority. They report to the Pentagon and that stuff. They do not typically get called up at the same time. So if all of a sudden you see every guard and reserve unit in your area getting called up at the same time, not just, you know, hey, this guard unit in this town and this reserve unit over in this town, it's all of them getting called up at the same time, something's about to occur. The call would probably go out, my guess would be 48 hours before the event, as close as 24 hours. Because they have a longer report period, report time than an active duty troop does. They typically get called in 24 to 48 hours ahead of time. Another thing you would see is mass cancellation of leaves on active duty troops. Now, I know there was a scare that went on with that with Hot Musket. But from what I heard on Hot Musket, it sounds like it was only that one guy that was called in, or that one unit that had their leaves canceled and they were told to report in. It wasn't across the board. You know, a mass call-up of active duty troops, everyone across the country getting called and told, hey, you need to report in immediately. That would be a pretty big indicator something major is about to happen. Now, that would happen within 24 hours. Because when they get called, they'll be told, hey, report within 12 hours, report within 24 hours, or, you know, depending on how far they are from their duty station. Another thing that you would see is unusual deliveries to guard and reserves. Now, they get deliveries all the time, okay? And believe it or not, they get their weapons through the mail, okay? It's really weird. Sometimes they'll get them dropped off by truck if they're, swapping out every rifle in the unit. But a lot of stuff comes through the mail. That happens, okay? New equipment comes through the mail. But if you have, say, a truck driving unit, a transportation company, and they all of a sudden get dropped off multiple pallets, like 6 or 12 or 20 pallets of concertina wire and multiple pallets of pickets, that would be unusual. Something like that showing up to an engineer unit or an infantry unit really would not be that unusual, because it's possible they're just rotating out their stuff. That stuff does get rusty and it wears out and you got to replace it. They DX it, direct exchange it, and the old stuff may get sold as scrap metal. Well, they'll bring in new stuff to replace it so that they can continue with their training or whatever. But you see those weird, unusual deliveries showing up at a guard or reserve unit that does not normally get that stuff. And that would happen, say, within a few weeks or the week before an event would occur. Another thing that would be a very big tip-off is talk from troops and law enforcement officers. When they start hearing stuff, they're going to start talking. At least telling their families that, hey, something's about to happen, you need to get ready. So you start seeing the spouses going out, buying up huge amounts of food and that stuff. Buying up every case of water they can get a hold of, every jug of water they can get a hold of, every case of juice and soda and stuff. You might want to start doing the same thing. Something's about to occur, so you need to be, having your head on a swivel. And something that I think would happen probably over, say, 48 to 72 hours, maybe 96 hours before an event would occur. It would be a lot harder to hide it at that point. Disappearances of alternative media people, politicians, dissenters, political dissenters, and militia leaders. So in this type of thing, it would be all of a sudden Rand Paul would disappear. His father, Ron Paul, would disappear. Alex Jones and his reporters and staff would all of a sudden disappear and their website would go down. Or the content on the website would be extremely altered and they're not doing live broadcasts, they're just doing rebroadcasts and no one's saying what's going on. Or Matt Drudge disappears all of a sudden and his website goes down. And then you would have in there, your political dissenters, people that are well-known critics of an administration or whatever. People that could potentially become leadership of a resistance. That's the type of people that would disappear. And that would really come into play a few days before the event. Now, if they were planning this long-term, these disappearances would start, say, a few weeks before. You'd pick off one here, one there, over there, and so on and so forth, just a few at a time so nobody would notice. But when you get real close to the event, it would be a lot harder to hide. That's when you'd start seeing larger groups disappearing in shorter periods of time. But those are some of the things I look for indicators on martial law. I know you can put in there movement, unusual movement of military equipment, but quite frankly, most people do not know what is normal movement of military equipment and what isn't. So you can't really throw that in there anymore. Seeing train loads of tanks moving around, train loads of Bradleys moving around, isn't really a good indicator. That could be, most of that stuff typically moves east-west. Okay, it's moving out to the training centers and then back to its home station, wherever that could be. It could be Fort Stewart, Georgia, Fort Hood, Texas, Riley, Kansas, Carson, Colorado, Fort Lewis, Washington, Fort Drum, New York, whatever. But you know, they'll send their equipment out to a training center and then it'll come back. Okay. So it's, and then there's always equipment moving around in summertime. Okay, so that happens. You have Guard and Reserve units. They do their annual trainings during the summer months because that's when the high school students, the college students, they're going to be out so they can do training. Plus you have other people, you know, their summer schedules open up for one reason or another, so that's why units typically schedule their annual trainings in those months. So these are just some of the indicators I look for. Okay, there could be more, but you know, if you can think of a few others, go ahead and put them in there. And I want ones that are, you know, not crazy, stupid conspiracy theory stuff, okay? Actual things that you look for, okay? I don't want to know about, hey, you know, you watch your city mayor and, you know, all of a sudden he does this, well, that tells me martial law is going to happen. Well, I doubt it, okay? If martial law occurs, why I look for these things, I'll put this in here. If it would ever occur, the group that is taking power, whether it is the military in a coup or politicians trying to take over in government, they need those troops or boots on the ground. They're going to need soldiers, they're going to need police. Another thing I'll throw in there is this stuff will probably occur related to an event. And that could be an event here stateside or overseas. It could be, you know, potential war with Russia, and before something happens or right after something happens, boom, martial law is declared. Or it could be an assassination. Let's say the president was to be assassinated. Well, whoever did it is going to try to declare martial law immediately afterwards. For those of you that aren't aware of this, when Kennedy was killed back in '63, there was attempts at that time of people in the federal government they tried taking over, they tried declaring martial law, but they fell flat on their faces because patriots in government stopped them. But at least out in the open, there's talk that there was stuff that went on behind the scenes and certain people disappeared at the same time. Reportedly, the same thing was tried by George H.W. Bush when Ronald Reagan was shot by Hinckley. People said that that was a coup, and it was done by H.W. He was trying to get Bush out of, or Reagan out of the way. He had Reagan shot because there's a lot of links between H.W. and the Hinckley family. There's talk that he tried getting martial law put into place after that, but the other members that were part of that little coup attempt told him to scale it back because they didn't want the Soviets to get involved in that stuff. So they didn't want to trip World War III. They just wanted to take over. So if a major event happens, that should be the time that you really look for something like this. Now, was the caravan a good event where they could have done something like this? Yes. Now, something I am really, really worried about on this, and I will do a part 2 on this and I will cover it. I will cover what a civil war would look like or potentially look like. And I will also talk about our current chances for something to happen here soon. So I will end here, get my board cleaned up, and I will put together part 2 right away. Now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot Militia movements, always remember, Essayons.